What's up, guys? Welcome into the Fireside Bears YouTube channel. Usayd alongside Max Smith here. You can follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. You can follow myself and Max on Twitter at Max Smith ESM and at Usayd Koshal. Max, how's it going?
Good. I think we're in an exciting time for Bears fans. There's a lot of news, a lot of things going around right now. Obviously, we have a new general manager and a new head coach, but we're in that exciting part of the coaching search where we get to look at new staff on the defense and offensive side. One thing is very clear: when Matt Eberflus was announced as the new head coach, there'd be a complete overhaul on both the defense and offensive side of the ball. And we also just learned recently in the past 24, 48 hours that I guess, former, not so much current member of the Packers offensive staff brain trust around Aaron Rodgers and Mike LaFleur will be hopping over to the Chicago Bears. Luke Getsy will be the Chicago Bears' new offensive coordinator. So today we're going to break down exactly who he is, as majority of us have never heard of him before this moment. Some really keen analysts and fans may be familiar with his work. Anyone who's watched the Packers over the past 4 years or so are unfortunately intimately familiar with his work. But this is an exciting addition for the Chicago Bears as we're finally bringing in some talent to legitimately develop Justin Fields. So what's your initial takes on bringing in Luke Getsy?
Well, first things first, I want to say congratulations to the Bengals for reaching the Super Bowl because this is the perfect time for a passive aggressive backhanded comment. Max, I really think it's amazing what happens when you hire a young offensive mind or just a head coach in general, and then you decide to select a quarterback in the NFL draft, and then you have that head coach involved in the process throughout the entire time in terms of selecting the quarterback and then drafting and developing, not like the way the Bears do things. But anyways, enough with the passive aggressive comments. Very exciting games on Sunday afternoon, I believe. But listen, I'm very excited about Luke Getsy because I think that it's certainly a different flavor. I mean, this is the first time I can recall the Bears going ahead and poaching from the Packers. And it's not like they poached a veteran coach here. This is someone who's in his late 30s, is basically an up and comer, someone that's had a couple head coaching interviews this offseason. I believe he interviewed with the Denver Broncos. But overall, when you look at Getsy, he arrived in Green Bay in 2014 as an offensive quality control coach. Kind of spent 2 seasons doing that. Then 2016, 2017, he was the wide receivers coach under head coach Mike McCarthy, I should say. McCarthy gets fired in 2018. Ironically, 2016, Getsy helps Devontae Adams have that big season. If you remember, Devontae Adams was not a high draft pick. He was a second round pick in a loaded wide receiver class that included names like Allen Robinson and Odell Beckham Jr. And so ultimately, Getsy kind of got the best out of Adams, helped propel him to being one of the top receivers in the game. And then, leaves for Mississippi State in 2018 to become the offensive coordinator. And I was talking to someone yesterday about Luke Getsy, and I mentioned that had Getsy decided to stay in college, what would have happened is odds are he would have been a college head coach because this is someone that's got the makings of having his own program at some point down the road, whether it's the NFL or the collegiate level. And then 2018 kind of comes back. I'm sorry, 2019 comes back to Green Bay, works as essentially the quarterback's coach. In 2020 and 2021, he kind of gets a promotion, works as a quarterback's coach and passing game coordinator. And so ultimately, when we look at Getsy, we see someone who's put the work in, and we see someone who's certainly ready to go, and someone that's climbing the NFL ladder. He may not be the hottest name on the planet. Okay, let's be real. When you're a coach for the Packers, all the attention is going to go to guys like Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers. The reality of the situation, though, is that Getsy's a very underrated offensive mind in the room that was present in Green Bay. I mean, he helped repair the relationship between Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur because that got off to a rocky start. Because if you guys remember, throughout the 2019 offseason, there were questions about how is this young veteran first how's this young first time head coach, this kind of guy who looks like he should be on The Bachelor, go ahead and mesh with this quarterback who's basically always used to having it his way.
There's a really good breakdown of exactly who he is, where he comes from, and you know what? There's a lot of question marks revolving around Luke Getsy from a fan perspective because you're right, he really is that big hot ticket name, right? He's not a guy that, like we previously mentioned, a lot of people know. He only has 1 year of play calling experience, and that was during his time at Mississippi State, right? And you mentioned that he made the decision to leave college to return back to the NFL, and that's a pretty distinctive decision, especially when Matt LaFleur kind of gives him a phone call and says, "Hey, I know you're really close with Aaron Rodgers. I'm about to coach this guy here in the Green Bay Packers. You think you'd like to come back and be the quarterback's coach and help coordinate the passing game?" I think it's really interesting that he was, kind of the right-hand guy for Matt LaFleur for the past couple of years with Nathaniel Hackett. And of course, he was serving under Nathaniel Hackett in that Packers offense. So there's a lot of things that we could hope that would translate because there's a lot of skill set that's common between Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields. I think that's something that a lot of people need to recognize. And I think that's something that Aaron Rodgers has recognized as well. If you hear him speak about Justin Fields, is both have an incredible ability to extend the play. Justin Fields is a better athlete than Aaron Rodgers ever was. I think that's kind of just a bonus for him. He's just quicker on his feet. He's got a faster 40. Both have incredibly great accurate deep balls. They love letting it fly. And both at times make bad decisions. Both at times have sloppy footwork, right? But if they find and identify one or two or three things that they can really focus on, which is what Aaron Rodgers did, and it's a testament to him, is he wanted to be the best in the league at one to two things. Sure enough, he did that. And sure enough, he has won Super Bowl, but he's a sure ticket to the Hall of Fame. So that's something that I think is really interesting from a Bears perspective is let's bring this guy in. What exactly can he translate over from his success in Green Bay? But I think the big question mark that, again, I'm going to raise is a lack of play calling experience. We got rid of the last guy because of his ineptitude in calling plays, right? We're going to bring in a new guy that's never really called plays before in a professional setting, and we're kind of hoping it goes well. Matt Eberflus has said nothing but amazing things about this guy. So is multiple coaches around the league, and his former coach or his former first boss at Akron, Joe Moorhead, who is also over at Penn State, right, and helping recruit Justin Fields. And unfortunately, Justin Fields for Penn State decommitted. But he had nothing but great things to say about Luke Getsy character-wise. And I think it's really indicative of what this Bears team is starting to build culture-wise is, these are guys that aren't going to be out-hustled. Luke Getsy is a guy that apparently is super prepared for every game, builds incredible game plans, looks at everything. And they asked Matt Eberflus what specifically he liked about Luke Getsy and why he's bringing him on. And he said, when you spend so much time in the NFL as I have, watching other teams' offenses and how they operate, you notice something. And he noticed just how intricate some of the passing schemes and designs are that the Green Bay Packers have implemented over the past several years while Luke Getsy was a part of that team. And he also noticed the run game. And he said he was really interested in how Luke Getsy operates. He's involved in implementing run schemes, even though he's primarily involved on the passing side of the offense. So there's a lot to raise your eyebrow at, not necessarily in a bad way, because this is just an interesting first step, right? I mean, Matt Eberflus is the first-time head coach in the Professional Football League. Luke Getsy will be the first-time offensive coordinator in the Professional Football League. And our biggest thing with hiring Matt Eberflus was, okay, we need to get a good offensive coordinator and a great quarterbacks coach, passing game guy, to really help Justin Fields find his footing in his second year, because this will be the most important year for his development. We know that historically, statistically, second years are the most important years for quarterbacks, right? So we bring in Luke Getsy. We interview Pep Hamilton, and reports that we're interviewing Joe Brady for a potential spot on the offensive staff. Does that look like a quarterback's coach position? What do you have to report there?
Yeah, well, first things first, I want to kind of take a step back here, I should say, to discussing a bit more about Luke Getsy, as I also look at the wedding photos for my cousin's wedding that finally uploaded.
Nice.
But anyways, the point I'm making, I think, needs to be said is that there's a few teams in the NFL that can kind of offer what the Bears have offered Luke Getsy. Okay, not only are they offering him a promotion from QB coach to offensive coordinator, they're basically giving him autonomy over the offense. They are giving him the opportunity to go ahead and develop Justin Fields. And they're putting him in a position where they're saying, hey, whatever you do, this is going to be your show in terms of the offense. And I know that the second and fourth options sound repetitive, but it's still real noteworthy because how many teams out there can kind of say, hey, we have a young rookie quarterback. You're an ascending offensive coordinator. We believe that you're good enough to spearhead this entire project. There's not a lot of teams out there that can offer that. All right. Maybe the Jags, right? But again, the Jags are just completely dysfunctional. Maybe a team such as the Patriots or a team with another young quarterback. But the problem is the Patriots are not going to go ahead and they're not replacing Bill Belichick anytime soon. And Josh McDaniels is the one who calls the plays. But McDaniels left for New England. So maybe, just maybe right there. But the point is that there's not a lot of teams that can offer what the Bears offer. Luke Getsy. Okay. And that's really noteworthy because this is going to be essentially all throughout the 2022 season. This is going to be a big job interview for Luke Getsy. This is going to be an opportunity for him to kind of go ahead and show the rest of the NFL, hey, I can certainly call plays. I can build an offense from scratch. I can basically go ahead and develop a quarterback. That's going to be Luke Getsy's opportunity. And these are key things to monitor because when you talk about rounding out the rest of the offensive staff, you know what? You need to keep something in mind is that the Bears are going with a high upside, high risk type offense here. Now, it's entirely possible that Justin Fields, being as talented as he is, figures out a way to succeed because of Luke Getsy or succeeds in spite of Luke Getsy. That's stuff that still needs to be seen. Now, in terms of the quarterback coach position, that's going to be another key position because if you look at the Bears right now, they have zero returning coaches and coordinators from last season. Now, earlier in the offseason, I was talking to someone and the conversation just naturally came up about, hey, who do you see the Bears bringing back? And again, this is when Ryan Poles was not in place. Neither was Matt Eberflus. I kind of talked about how, you know what, I would like to see at least Sean Desai come back, but we know that's not happening now because Matt Eberflus is bringing in Alan Williams to be his defensive coordinator. But I also talked about how if there's going to be a coach on the offensive staff from Matt Nagy that I would love to see retained, it would have been John DeFilippo. Why? Because DeFilippo's worked with Derek Carr during his rookie season. He went ahead and he worked with Nick Foles. He got the best out of Blake Bortles. Wherever DeFilippo's gone, I think we have to understand that his quarterbacks have had success. And so naturally, it just made more sense to bring John DeFilippo back, knowing that he had an established year of work with Justin Fields. Now, in case DeFilippo isn't back, I'm going to tell you guys right now, he's going to land on his feet somewhere in the NFL. He's very coveted among NFL circles. I can tell you that firsthand. But Joe Brady makes sense because when you look at Joe Brady, now the easy thing to do was say, well, you know what? Look at his previous history of work. He helped the LSU offense in 2019 put up basically historic numbers. It's because of him that Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Terrace Marshall, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, players like Cesar Ruiz, Lloyd Cushenberry, they were well, Cesar Ruiz went to Michigan, but I'm sorry. Anyways, it was because of Joe Brady, all those players kind of took off and became first, second, third round draft picks. So for Joe Brady, when you look at his background, it includes being a linebackers coach. He's not going to be a linebacker here. He was an offensive assistant under Sean Payton. He was also a wide receivers coach and a passing game coordinator. So the point is Joe Brady, he could come in and, be a wide receivers coach or even be a quarterbacks coach for that matter. So he's a really intriguing high upside option that you look at. A lot of people kind of look at him and say, well, he's only 32 years old. He's not that much older than, me, because I'm like 24 years old at this point. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is because Joe Brady's a very high upside guy. He's someone you want in your building. I know people are going to be like, well, he was an offensive coordinator in Carolina. He floundered. The only reason he flounders is because once Sam Darnold was his quarterback, and Sam Darnold's been broken. Once you break these rookie quarterbacks, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you right now, you cannot repair them. When you watch and evaluate as much football as I do, you can just look at one or two game tapes and realize, yeah, this guy's going to succeed. This guy's probably not going to succeed. And then number two, right, because Matt Rule thinks he's supposedly running a college program, and the Panthers' first 9 draft picks in the Matt Rule era were all defense in a league which is offensive driven. I understand you want to draft develop and build your defense that way, but you need to invest more into the offense if you were going to give Sam Darnold a legitimate chance. Also, I just want to say thank you, Matt Rule, for being like head coach / de facto general manager and taking J.C. Horn and Sam Darnold over Justin Fields.
Yeah, both very great presence. Also firing Joe Brady and potentially having him end up in our laps. And I also want to add in a third possibility is that maybe Brady wasn't ready for it. Maybe Joe Brady just wasn't ready for the responsibilities of calling plays every Sunday, right? You mentioned he's young. His resume is stellar for his age, but maybe he just needs to slow down his horses a bit, and he actually wasn't ready for the massive responsibilities of being an offensive coordinator, right? Maybe Matt Nagy wasn't ready for the responsibilities of being a head coach of an original founding, member of the NFL, right? So I think these are questions that we have to ask ourselves is sometimes guys may be perfect on paper for the role, but when they actually start performing, we go, wait a second, doesn't make much sense here. What's going on? Well, maybe they just need to take a step back, reassess, learn what they did well, learn what they did bad, take a year or two under their belt, and then get back up on that saddle, right? And I think that this is a perfect opportunity for Joe Brady to do that in the NFL. Get some NFL experience real hand. If it's as a wide receiver coach, because the Bears don't have a wide receiver coach at the moment, right? Or unless we're returning or retaining talent, or passing game coordinator. There's a bunch of different spots that he could sit on this offense. And it's really up to Eberflus and Getsy to pick that. And it's up to Brady whether or not he's willing to take it. But I think it's also interesting to note that Luke Getsy is a guy that can easily be a head coach in the NFL in a few years. If this gig does well for Getsy and the Bears, he'll be looking at an offer within two to 3 years, 100%, which means that we could have a revolving door at the offensive coordinator position. That would mean that Justin Fields is doing well, right? That would mean that Justin Fields is we're going to the playoffs, deep into the playoffs, and that teams are looking to pick at the Bears brain trust that we've developed with Justin Fields. Then you look at potentially hiring from below, which would be Joe Brady, working his way up, getting his notches right, earning, losing some of that greenhorn. And now he's offensive coordinator in 2026 for the Chicago Bears after Luke Getsy gets hired by the Giants or something after Brian Daboll inevitably fails, because I just have a feeling it's going to happen. So there's all of these different possibilities we're looking at, and it's how do we bring in a bunch of different guys that have nothing but upside, right? Nothing but future potential, and putting them. And I think this is really interesting because we've been saying this all year long is good coaches put players in positions to succeed. Well, good coaches also put other coaches in positions to succeed, right? Good coaches don't hit up other coaches at 9 p.m. on a Friday night saying, hey, I'm going to take this job with the Chicago Bears. I think you'd be really great for this job, right? No, unless they knew that this is a guy, like this is a position that this guy can succeed in, they're not going to bring him in. And if there's one thing we've learned so far about Eberflus, and we're going to do a breakdown because we'll have a week of interviews and content for Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus as their first week of general manager and head coach to really dive into, is these guys are character first. These guys are hustle. These guys are effort. These guys are, we want the most prepared men on Sunday that we can possibly have, right? And that starts with the locker room. And Eberflus said it. He said, these guys are going to work harder than they've ever worked in their life. And in a year, they're going to come back and tell me, or I'm going to ask them, was I right? Was this the hardest year you've ever had in your life? And they're going to say, yeah. But it makes them better, right? It's all about the hustle. It's all about the grit. And that starts with the coaching staff. If the coaching staff isn't bought into that mission, and if they aren't the most prepared people on Monday, then their players aren't going to be the most, prepared players on Sunday. So I think there's a lot to like here between Luke Getsy. When we're looking at it scheme-wise, it's not that entirely different. I mean, it is. It's definitely not Nagy's system, but it has a bit of that. It's going to have a bit of that LaFleur elements. It's going to have a bit of the power, like not necessarily running it down your throat. Some laser-esque run schemes, and it's really about taking advantage of what we have right now, which isn't a whole lot. It's a good place to start. But it's about taking advantage of the system that we have right now. And it's been very clear that Getsy and Eberflus are very sold on Justin Fields and the promise that he brings, and are very sold on some of the offensive chips and elements that we currently have.
Yeah, and knowing the way that, and we'll get more to this on Thursday, when we're back and recording even more. But knowing the way that Ryan Poles basically stood up to George McCaskey and Bill Polian when they told him go Jim Caldwell, and then he was like, absolutely not. You guys, your opinion is absolutely invalid in this search. Knowing that, you know for a fact that Ryan Poles is ready and here to work with Justin Fields. And one of the big conditions was, you want to be head coach of the Chicago Bears? Well, you're going to have to work with Justin Fields. This is one of those things. Okay. And, speaking of Brian Dable and the New York Giants, I mean, shout out to our guy, Alex Wilson, who decided to write an article discussing whether or not our guy, Mitch Trubisky, should be starting in New York next year. I know a lot of people are going to be like, he failed in Chicago, but Giants fans, you should know one thing is that your quarterback is not a fit for, Daniel Jones is not a fit for Brian Dable's system. I'm sorry. He's absolutely not. You need someone that can actually run and has legs and isn't a statue in the pocket. Mitch Trubisky makes Daniel Jones look like a statue in the pocket. I'm serious when I say that. So, Giants, go sign Mitch Trubisky. Do yourself a favor, and you will be destined for like 15 to 16 years of just absolute franchise greatness. And maybe this is just what needs to happen with the Giants organization, okay? Is that you select a quarterback, it doesn't work out, and then you take, another team's quarterback that you probably should have selected anyway, and then you just go ahead and make him your franchise quarterback. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it from us. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at FireSideBears. Make sure you're following myself and Max on Twitter at MaxSmithySM and at Usayd Coach Show. We'll be back on Thursday, guys. Going to continue to upload like 2 days a week in the off season. Hopefully, if we're able to stick to that schedule, it just depends on what Max and I have going on outside of YouTube. But anyways, yeah, peace out, guys. We'll see y'all in a bit.